Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Dr. Manon.
Welcome to the Healers Café, and today I'm speaking with Cynthia Clark. And let me tell you a little bit about her before she takes over. So she's a palm reading consultant, compatibility expert, and heart harmonizer. And she's the author of Stories in Your Hands, Discover Your Authentic Destiny Using Palmistry and Tarot. She has worked with over 7,000 people worldwide in the last 10 years, and her current work involves healing people's emotional past, identifying real compatibility, and providing the platform for singles to find long-lasting love through the merging of ancient modern technology and quantum physics. Cynthia also offers readings, coaching, courses, professional training, and is passionate about sharing her vast knowledge of palmistry as an empowered tool for both singles and couples. So I want to welcome, I just want to add that yes, couples and singles, but to health, it's so important. Your relationship to yourself, the capacity that palmistry has in helping people heal, and if you have baggage that you haven't cleared, it's in your relationship or in your relationship to yourself, it's bound to show up and ruin your health. So that's why I wanted to have that perspective a little bit, just expand it from just seeking your lover. So, because I do see that it can be applied, much bigger. So anyway, welcome. And yeah, please feel free to share. Is there anything else that I've missed from that introduction?
No, thank you so much for inviting me on the show, by the way. I really appreciate it. And you're absolutely right. Somebody who is looking for their soulmate match, if they don't do the emotional work behind it, chances are you're either going to attract a very inappropriate partner, or you're not going to attract a partner at all. So you're right, that inner work is so critical. And we all have a past. We all have things that we go through, and we all have I would call them events, like traumatic events that shape our lives. And if we can actually go and heal those little traumas and wounds and all of that stuff, then we can move forward and actually attract the right partner to us that's going to actually make us really happy.
So on the healer's journey, because every healer has a journey, what happened before I ask you how that works and how is it all written in your hand and all these kinds of questions? What was your journey that led you down this path in the first place?
Well, I actually have a pretty normal upbringing, I guess you would say. I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I was raised in the Mormon religion, which I guess some people wouldn't call that normal. but that's what I knew growing up. And I actually left the church when I was about 15. And I was so independent, and I just wanted to kind of get out on my own and do my own thing and kind of discover the world, what else is in the world. So that's kind of where I started. But I was the youngest of 4 kids, and I had 2 very nice parents who loved me, and, nothing really traumatic about that. And I started my journey in business. I got a business degree from the University of Utah. And I knew after I took my first entrepreneur class that I wanted to work for myself. And so that kind of sparked more independence, which was great, and I ended up starting my own restaurant by the time I was 24. I ran that for 7 years with my now ex-husband, and we ran a very, very successful business together. So that was my start.
Wow. So you started with business, running a restaurant, and what made you decide to, I would say it's kind of a shift gears, right? To go into,
totally.
So
Yeah.
what provoked that, or how did that happen in your life?
So yeah, there were a couple of like pivotal moments. I would say the first pivotal moment was when my Qigong teacher walked into my restaurant. And she was this beautiful, small woman from Switzerland. And she just had such a huge energy about her. And she was so clear on what she was doing. She came into the restaurant and she said, "I teach Qigong." And I'm like, "What is that?" And I had no idea what she was talking about. And she's like, "Well, you need to take my classes and you will find out." And and it was so clear, like, to her, what I needed to do. But she was right. She was absolutely right. I ended up training with her for 5 years. And she taught me so much about the alternative world of energy and how it all works. And that I didn't have to just go to a doctor for every little thing I had wrong with me. I could actually work on healing myself. How amazing is that? So I learned that I could heal myself. I trained with her. It was so beautiful. I just had, I have such respect for her because she taught me so much. So that was my first pivot. During that time too, like while I was working the restaurant, I used to take the winters off and I would ski a lot. Right. And one day I actually did have a small accident skiing. And I was skiing on a pretty steep black diamond run, and I was right next to some avalanche debris. So an avalanche had already slid, and I was right next to the debris, and I ended up skiing into the debris, just barely, and it caught my tips and I flipped over and I was totally stuck. So I had to dig myself out. I ended up twisting my knee almost to the point of it popping. And I ended up, it took me a while, but I ended up getting myself out because there was nobody else around. Nobody could help me. I was really kind of like, you're on your own. And I skied down and I was thinking, I think I'm out for the season. And this was a February. I can't remember what year, but I was thinking, oh no, I can't finish the season. And my knee swelled up like really huge. And I was thinking, well, if I go to the doctor, what are they going to do? They're going to say, well, you need to ice it and keep it elevated. And there's really not a whole lot they can do for something like that. Maybe give you some pain killers or whatever. So I decided not to go to the doctor. I'm like, that's a waste of time. And I'm like, I'm going to heal this myself. Yeah. And then I was remembering all the stuff I had learned in my Qigong classes up to that point. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to focus on green healing energy. And I'm going to envision my knee perfectly healthy. Mm-hmm. I did this for 4 days. By the 5th day, I was skiing again. Mm. So it totally worked. And yes, I did keep it elevated, and yes, I put the ice on it and all that. And I, did the stuff that the doctors would have recommended anyway. But I did that little extra thing, and it made a huge difference. And I just totally pictured it healthy, and like it wasn't going to stop me.
And how did you deal with the thoughts people would have typically, like, oh, what if it's torn? What if the ligaments are, or maybe there's a avulsion fracture, or any of those things that, I guess the thing is, if you're trained in all that, you're going to think about all those things. but how did you deal with that? How did you set that up as like, okay, I'm going to put the energy to healing this? How did you have a sense that was safe and good to do?
Well, like I said, that the training I got from my Qigong teacher really taught me that I could do things on my own. I could heal things on my own. So I was already in that mindset. Like, she put me in that mindset. But this was after years of training with her.
Right.
So yeah. So if it had been, before I had met her, I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have gone to the doctor like anybody else. I probably wouldn't, I probably would have had a lot more fear around it. But because I knew, I already knew that I could heal myself, if that makes sense. It's like my mindset was never like, you can't heal or you won't heal. And I figured, well, I'll just try this first. And that was really kind of like where I go now with everything. It's like, I'm going to try and do something first on my own. And if it doesn't get better, or if it's, a big problem, then I'll go see somebody else about it. Now, obviously, this doesn't qualify if you're like bleeding, like, like if you have something like seriously wrong that needs to be addressed immediately, like,
or if half your leg was down the hill.
Obviously, I would go to the doctor. But this wasn't a life-threatening illness. I knew it was just an injury, and I knew it, and maybe after the 4 days, and if it hadn't gotten better, maybe I would have gone to a doctor at that point. But I figured, you know what, let's try it. Let's try this on my own first and see how it works. And that's pretty much how I do everything.
So what is it in Qigong that gave you that confidence or that realization that it's okay, on some level to see what the body can do before we, run all the alarms and we sort of give away, kind of our power to all the technology and all this, the sort of, it's good. It can be diagnostic, but it also can cause just a whole bunch of, intense worry and more stuff, whereas we could just be focusing on healing. So how was that process? Or I don't know if that's even an answerable question, but if it is, go for it.
Yeah, well, you're right. A lot of people don't really understand what Qigong is all about. So it's the Chinese version of yoga is basically how we describe it. Okay. And it comes from China versus India. Yoga comes from India. So, but in my opinion, Qigong is it's slightly different in the focus of versus yoga. It focuses on intentful corrections. So one of the intentful corrections is the mind, clearing the mind, putting your mind at ease, getting rid of, the monkey mind, that sort of thing. And that's where all the worry and fear and stress and, part of your correction, and this is what, right when you go into any Qigong practice, is you clear that mind. Okay, so that's part of just getting into the practice. Part two, of course, an intentful correction is the breath. Slowing down your breathing, taking deeper breaths, and they do what's called Dantian breathing, which is abdominal breathing. So you focus on that deeper, longer breath, and then you focus on your body. It's like, okay, where am I holding tension in my body? And then you go to that part of your body and you relax it, and you also focus it in terms of meridians. So almost all Qigong uses meridians it's sort of like acupuncture without needles, where you actually think about a meridian that wants to open, or you're going to open it up, and you just think about it opening, even if you don't know exactly where it runs, these channels that run through your body. So it's a little different than like the chakra system. It runs like the meridians run through the whole body, and they correspond with a major organ. So the way my teacher taught me was that we do the 3 intentful corrections before we do the practice, and then we go into the practice. So it's very healing. Just doing that alone is very, very healing.
Right. Yeah, and now there's like all this research that the meridian lines are actually part of the fascial lines. you know,
Oh, that makes sense.
which
Yeah.
is interesting, because that's also, you know, when you see blocks in that area, it also affects the flow and the communication. You
Yeah,
know,
that
so
makes
it's
sense.
yeah, no, very, very interesting. So the first step then is calming that mind, which I find interesting, you know, because when, at least from my experience in healing, you have to be in that parasympathetic state, that the ability to allow the body to rest, you know, restore, repair. And when you're in this sympathetic state, you're really activated by response and worry and anxiety, and you know, you're not shut down at all. You're not able to focus your attention to the
Exactly.
healing capacity of the body. So
Mhm.
yeah, no, so very interesting. So like, how is that related, or is it related, or to palmistry? Because I mean, palmistry, you know, there's a lot of like woo woo kind of, you know, I remember finding myself, I think I was in Paris as a young kid, or oh no, it was in Belgium, in Brussels, and somebody took my hand and looked at it and went, oh, trouble, trouble, you know, and then ran away. And I was like, oh my God, okay, interesting life, you know. And then I spent time, you know, recovering from that, going, no, that was just like, interesting doesn't mean bad, you know.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
you know,
stuff like that drives me crazy, because the hands are changeable, first of all. You know, so this is where a lot of people get stuck in the kind of the gypsy fortune telling mode, that, oh, I'm going to look at my hand and the person's going to tell me that I'll be single the rest of my life, or I'll die an old spinster. It's like total garbage, okay? It's just like, not, it is not real, because the hands change. So even, I mean, yes, we can see things in the hands. Past, present, and future actually does show up on the hands all the time. But because we have free will, we can change how things show up in our hands. So
interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that, because you know, when they do thumbprints, you know, now they do that everywhere traveling. It's like you're always going to be found, right? So
yeah.
the actual lines of the hands change.
Yes. So
Wow.
you're right. You're right that the fingerprints do not change. Those actually form 5 months before you're born, representing your soul imprint. So I read fingerprints more in terms of like your soul's agenda, and what does your soul want to accomplish in this lifetime, and what's going to make your soul happy. What are the major life themes that you're going to experience? How you experience them is through everything else in your hands. So your hand shape, which forms by the time you're about 6 years old, and then the lines, which are the most changeable part of your hands, show how you're actually developing talents, using talents, how you handle stress or don't handle stress, what kind of blockages do you have. Those kinds of things show up in the hands. So your hands are like a mirror to everything about who you are.
Oh, yeah. Because then I later had another hand. I don't think he called himself a Palmistry, but anyway, he spoke German, so I don't know what it was called. But that he came to Vancouver, and then he didn't know who I was, but a friend of mine introduced, you know, that he was making talks, and he said he does it for health, and that was one of the things. So I invited some of my my patients who I thought would find it insightful to see a different perspective. And of course, I'm open, you know, I'm an open learner. Anything I don't know, well, I was going to beat that omen of you know, difficult life. So he knew nothing about me, because I wanted it that way, and he didn't know who I was in the group, and we didn't change names and or anything. So he did a reading, and he said that 2 things that came out. One is that I'm a healer. That was like, he said, that's written right through. That's your entire life, you know.
That's
and
yes.
Interesting, because that seems to be true. And then he said that I am a speaker that there are no stages big enough for the message I have to share, which now that feels like, oh my God, like that's a big promise, you know. But he said those are the two things, and I thought that's very interesting, you know. Like it felt, you know, right. And then when he did my patients, I was like, wow, he could actually see what's going on. So we had like a great time. So I don't know, tell me more, because I didn't get to ask him any questions after. He just sort of left, and then he was out of town, and we were all kind of like, wow, you know. So tell us a bit more how that works, and how, like, you know, what is it, the size, like, or how would you do all that?
Yes, well, ideally, if you have enough time, you do a full analysis of the hands.
Okay.
Which does take, for me, I like to split it into 3 sessions, because there really is that much information. So I can read one set of hands, usually takes me about 3 hours. So just kind of keep that in mind, so everybody realizes how much information is in your hands. There's really that much. So I would spend probably a good 45 minutes just on fingerprints. You know, the fingerprints, there's 14 different types of fingerprints, and you can have over 10,000 different combinations. That's going to definitely show you that big soul agenda. So the healer is one of the basic life purposes, but there are other combinations that can show up as healer markers. So for example, there's a talent marker that is the healer. By the way, if everybody would want to look at this, it's an easy one to actually spot, which is kind of fun. So if you look at your hand, you look underneath your little finger, and you want to look for vertical lines that are going to be above the heart line, which is your major line that's going to be under the fingers. So under the little finger, there's going to be 4 or more little lines that are vertical lines, and they're going to be together right there. Okay. So if you have this mark, which by the way, not everybody does, that is the mark of a healer. And if you have, say, 8 of these lines, sometimes people have all the way up to 8 lines that are lined up like that. We call that the healer of healers. So that's somebody who teaches healers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I've got 6 of them, it looks like 6, and then there's one that looks short.
Yeah. Well, I would say you're probably in the healer of healer category.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do teach healthcare practitioners, right? Bowen therapy. So.
Yeah. Well, then you're you know, you're using one of your talents.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, that's very important. And then as far as like speaking goes, speaking also shows up as a purpose. So that shows up in fingerprints. And that would be related to your little finger, which we call Mercury. Okay, Mercury is your communication finger. By the way, all the fingers are named after the Roman gods. Okay. So this is just like it's a tradition that's been carried over, you know, several hundred years, but palmistry actually goes back probably over 5,000 years. I'm not sure what they used to call the fingers, but this is kind of where modern hand analysis has evolved, is we all call the fingers Jupiter, Saturn, Apollo, and Mercury. And that's kind of the standard now. So Mercury, your finger of communication, occasionally you'll have these little lines, just like you have underneath the finger. So like the healers, we call it healing stigmata. You may also have it in your upper phalange of Mercury. So in this section, we call this the zone of ideas. And if you have little vertical lines running through this section as well, that is I call those messenger lines. And they indicate that you have a message that you're trying to get out. Okay.
I got 5. Well, 6. One goes sideways. Yeah. I thought that we were all like, I thought I was just getting wrinkly.
No, these are lines. Now, when we have horizontal lines, though, that's where we have stress. Okay, so especially in the fingers. So if you have vertical lines running through the fingers, that shows flow into what the part of the finger represents. And if you have horizontal lines, then that shows more of a blockage or a stress.
Okay.
And again, these are very changeable lines. So they're going to ebb and flow based upon your current situation.
And do you, like, is it the same in both hands? You can use either hand, or they have different meanings?
Yes, they have different meanings. So both hands are actually important, but your active hand, or the hand that you write with, is going to show more of like your developing self. And you can think of, like, if you, for example, if you have that healing stigmata on your active hand, that shows a talent that's already developed. If you see it on your passive hand, or the hand you don't write with, then it would show up as a potential. So it would be something like, hey, guess what? You could become a healer if you want to, or you could think about getting out your message, you know, just as two examples. So your passive hand shows more of that inner kind of quiet self. And it can definitely, it usually shows up a little, as far as more lines, it shows more lines usually on the passive hand. But yeah, they're both quite interesting to look at, because depending upon what you're looking at will show the difference. So yeah, I like to look at both hands for sure.
That's interesting, yeah.
And when it comes to fingerprints, I have to read all 10 fingerprints to really see what the roadmap of your life is.
Right.
And then we also have hand shape, and that hand shape is actually what I personally use more than anything, because that is how I match people to their soulmate.
Oh, that's
Okay.
interesting. So, so what's the story like? Okay, if I go by, I mean, you don't have to analyze it like crazy. So do you look at the width of it, or like it's small, or what's the shape? What do you look at?
Okay, so yeah, so your hand shape forms by the time you're about 6 years old, and it represents your subconscious influences. Okay, so when you think about being a little baby to the time you're about 6 years old, you're completely in your subconscious mind, and you're just absorbing everything around you. Okay, so when a baby is born, their hand shape is not set. Okay, it actually changes quite a bit up until they're about 6. And then it starts to gel or set. And that's also when we start moving into more of the adult brain states, right? So by the time the person is 6 or 7 or 5, somewhere in there, you pretty much have your idea about how the world works. Okay, this affects you for the rest of your life, right?
Right.
So it's going to represent a set of personality traits that will impact you not only in your own personality, but also who you are most compatible with, how you interact with other people. I mean, it's just so amazing that I can't believe people aren't using this. That's why I teach people, because it's so useful. Because if you know your archetype and what is your natural energy and how you naturally express yourself in the world, it can just help you in everything. So it can help you be more authentic. It can help you recognize your innate strengths. I also call it the relationship genius. Like, what is your innate relationship genius, and what do you bring to a partner? You know, so yeah, so we actually measure, it's a branch of palmistry called chirognomy. And we take a look at the relative length of the fingers to the palm. And then we also look at the fingers relative to each other.
Okay.
Okay, so basically just a few measurements and you can determine your archetype. So yeah, so hold up your hand again for me and I can probably identify what you are. Just back it up for me. I need to see the whole hand. Okay, stop right there. Okay, so yeah, I actually measure out that middle finger in relation to your palm. And it looks like you have short fingers. Looks like your palm is very long. So you're a rectangular palm. So you're a fire hand. Okay, so that's your primary element is fire, which represents somebody who's very instinctive, passionate, driven, likes to expand and explore. Fire types are very energetic. Also, then we look at your fingers. I would definitely say your index finger. Here, hold your fingers together for me. Yeah, your index finger is, or Jupiter is your strong finger. So your archetype is the Chariot. Okay, so chariots are all about inspiring other people to action.
Woo! That works.
When you think about the chariot, it's like, what is the chariot doing? The chariot is moving. Okay. And if you don't get on board, you're going to get left behind. Okay. So chariot people are very dynamic people, and they're always looking at the bigger picture, because that's Jupiter. Jupiter is the visionary. Jupiter is the one who, you know, looks at the idealism of the world, you know, so you're not afraid to like, what could be better? How can we make the world better? How can things be better? And then that fire energy is the passion that drives it.
Wow, that's like pretty dead on.
I know, and this is just from your handshake, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, so then I take that system, I take the system of, okay, you're a fire Jupiter person. Who are you best matched to? Well, you would be best matched to an air hand, which is going to be somebody with long fingers and a square palm, which is the exact opposite hand shape of you. And they're going to have a strong middle finger or Saturn finger. We call that the administrator hand. Okay, now administrator types are very curious, and that fire gets fed by the air. Okay, so that type of personality would feed your passion and help to drive the chariot. Okay, and because they also have the Saturn energy, it brings it into a practical sense of like, well, how do we actually do this? And so they're really good with details. They're good with taking your ideas and putting them into practicality. That's your administrator type. So when you can actually find people who are great matches for you, you can surround yourself, you know, with energy that's complementary. And that's really what my whole system is about. It's like, you know, once you learn it, it's like, okay, you need to find those people, like they're out there for you. But you know, people often wonder like, well, why do I get along better with some people than others? This is why. It's because of the hands, and there's certain energies are just natural affinities to each other, and certain energies are not. It's like the water and the oil. Sometimes they blend and sometimes they don't blend.
Right.
So I've tried to not only quantify it for people, and as you can tell, it's quite scientific, but I've also automated it where people can actually go in and find matches just by using their hand. So,
oh, that's fascinating. Yeah. But I was thinking, you know, because I definitely my team members in my business, right, are definitely a match for me, right? But it's interesting. Yeah, my partner, I don't think that's how his hands look like, you know, for me anyways. I'd have to look. I'm not an analyst, so I haven't paid attention to so a long finger in the middle, that's the thing, right?
Right, the middle finger.
I'll have to double check. He's not here right now.
Yeah, but any air hand would be a great match for you. So anybody with long fingers and a square palm.
So he has a square palm. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, those are the best. Yeah, those are your best matches for sure.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, that's for sure. I just don't remember the little finger.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting. Oh, that's very cool. And I did not know that hands don't take like definite shape, like final shape, till 6. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it is quite fascinating.
Yeah.
But it makes perfect sense when you think about what's happening in that early childhood. It makes total sense.
Yeah. But then so I've got lots of questions then. So, you know, there's all kinds of ways to work with the subconscious, right?
Yes.
Many methods, many different ways in. If the hand is formed, then once you address the subconscious and the issue, like, does the hand start changing, or
Yes.
the actual shape of the hand will change?
Well, the archetype is not likely to change.
The archetype. Okay.
So
Yeah.
what we were referring to with the relative fingers versus the palm, that's very unlikely to change.
Okay. Okay.
But like I was saying, the lines on the hands, which reflect a whole boatload of information, they're very changeable. So yeah, so if you're working with a subconscious block, like let's say, for example, you have an ambition block, okay? And a lot of people who are professionals struggle with this, okay?
Right.
Ambition block is going to show up inside your middle finger, your middle phalange of Jupiter, so your index finger. We call this your leadership finger, by the way. Okay, so if you have a horizontal line running through this middle phalange, that's your zone of ambition. And so let's say you work on that subconscious block.
Right.
Okay? That line will disappear. And you can track it.
Wow.
So I actually love doing time-lapse readings for people because I love to see how things change.
And these are lines, like, they're not the lines like that get squiggly right here as you bend, right? You're talking about lines literally inside, where otherwise they're straight.
Right. We all have like the separation, sections, like everybody has those lines, but yeah, we're talking inside the section. So usually in the middle of the phalange.
Wow.
Okay. But yeah, it's
cool. I don't have any blocks. I'm shocked.
And the other cool thing about it is that you can identify what you're really struggling with.
Wow, that's incredible, actually. Yeah. So
tangible, you identify it.
Yeah. So you have like a place that people who want to learn more or find out what is their block, they could get information or learn about it or contact you, or
yes. I actually help people heal their emotional. I help people heal their emotional past. That's one of my. I have an online course that's all about that, and explore emotional stresses and things like that. I also just do readings for people too. So if they just want a reading, I'm more than happy to look at whatever they want to look at. So yeah, they can either go to loveinyourhands.com, which is my my relationship website, or they can go to worldofhands.com, which is more of my general information website.
Okay. Oh, great. I'm definitely going to share that. So any other, I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, we didn't really talk about the middle lines and the lines right on the hand. Is there some general, because we have about 5 minutes, so I don't want to take you down a massive path, but is there anything on that would be interesting to look at?
Well, for sure, people are curious about their major lines. Okay, so the first thing you want to look at is the quality of the line. Okay, so when a line is what we call clear, it's going to just have like the line itself. It's not going to be all bubbly, or it's not going to break. It's not going to have all kinds of stuff going on. So, you can tell your overall health and your overall well-being by looking at your lifeline. Okay. Now, the lifeline does not tell you how long you're going to live. Okay, so this is probably the #1 myth in palm reading, because remember what I have been saying this whole episode is your lines change. So your lifeline, however, does tell you about your stability and your overall vitality. So your constitution is in your lifeline. Okay, so this is your lifeline here. It goes around your thumb ball. Okay, so it starts above your thumb, comes down, and usually it ends somewhere near your wrist. Some people do have short lifelines, which, by the way, doesn't mean, again, early death. It simply means the person is not grounded. Okay, they don't have a strong root chakra, for example. So they don't have a sense of home or a sense of groundedness. And once they get that, it'll grow. Like, you'll see the line grow. If you have a break in your lifeline, I do consider that a big deal. And it's usually associated with a change in your stability or change in your vitality. So it could be construed as an accident, or an illness,
Mhm.
depending upon how it's breaking. So it is kind of important to pay attention. And also you want to look at the quality of the line. So if your line is kind of broken up, or if it's just sort of weak looking, then your constitution is probably a little bit weaker as well. So you can also tell kind of the overall energy that you have by looking at this Venus mount, which is this puffy section inside the lifeline. And you want to take a look at that section. And if you squeeze it, you want it to kind of bounce back. You want it to be elastic. And if it's elastic, it's showing that your overall energy is pretty good. Okay, so, but if it collapses, you're probably pretty tired, or maybe you're not getting enough sleep. So you can kind of identify how you are relative to other people too, like check their Venus mounts out and you'll see, you know, the quality. So those are two really important sections to kind of pay attention to.
And those are like, because I'm looking at mine on my left hand, there's a definite, like, there's definitely two line, like there's a,
okay, hold your hand up for me.
Yeah.
Let me see that. Okay, so it looks like the break kind of ties in with your fate line. Okay, so that's your fate line that it connects to. So when I see a line like that particular
this one doesn't have it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this one over here is indicating that your vitality is connected to your work, because your fate line actually represents your career.
Ah, interesting.
Okay. So
what does that mean?
That means that you need to follow your chariot. Your chariot work is very important.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think most people would say I have to stop working, but obviously that doesn't look like what my hands are saying.
No, I wouldn't say that at all. Chariots are very driven, and they need to have somewhere to go.
Right.
Because think about a chariot that's stuck in the mud.
Yeah.
Like, not a good place to be. And I always tell people, you want to be your type. You want to be what your archetype is telling you to express.
Right.
Because that's really where you're going to find the joy and fulfillment. So yeah.
Okay. God for that advice, because I was very hands just in case it's like stop working and stop, like no, I can't, I really can't, you know. No. I love what I'm doing.
You don't want to.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't want to.
No, you wouldn't be happy. You'd be like so bored after like a week.
Yeah.
Going, what do I do now?
Totally. Anyway, well, thank you so much for that's a wealth of information. I had no idea that that it was that, you know, complex, right? Because my two experiences with it were, you know, just interesting, but a little bit, you know, lacking in depth of that. And yeah, I can totally see. So like, if people have, because our time's up, but if people have a health issue, does it help them by looking at their hands? I mean, I can see their character, these kinds of things, but does it help? And how so? And then we'll
health shows up all over your hands. So yeah, one part of my reading, especially when I do a more thorough reading, is looking at the health aspects. And you know, a lot of times it corresponds also with your emotional, your spiritual, your mental health. Like, it all plays out in your hands. All of it does. So it absolutely can give you insights into what's going on. So yes, I would strongly encourage people to get their hands analyzed if they're having any kind of issue with anything.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Cynthia. That was, you know, very enlightening. And thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. It's been fun.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Dr. Manon. For more information, go to drmanonbollinger.com.